At your deathbed, you've lived a film.
We don't come to Earth for a long time. We come for a very short amount of time.
For most people, In the Sidelines was the second film.
The hell with it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to become a writer.
For whatever reason, and whether you didn't have the courage or the curiosity or the confidence, it never came to be.
We finished training the horses, and we started the journey.
And the purpose and the reason we do the do
Must is just who you are.
This is your life.
Seize the day.
is to narrow the distance between those two films.
Wow, how sweet is that? Well, that's my talk. There it is. I'm all done. So that's the deal. Well, I want to thank Gary and Anna. I thought I was the only one that you stalked, but now I find out that's not true. that she does that with all kinds of people. But it's a good technique, you know, because they pay attention to you. So as was mentioned, I have a long history with this ranch, so it's great for me to kind of come back here. And a couple of things that I will say about it for those of you who are you know, maybe a little younger than I am. This ranch, it was called Valley Oak, started by the Fetzer family, was a place that really, in America, it changed America in the most dramatic way because it taught about organics and biodynamics and the whole world of how to grow things properly and all of that. And it came from, I think Ken mentioned, from this family, slightly dysfunctional. No, I shouldn't say that. They were a bunch of outlaws, I think is how I would describe them. But who came together and decided that a couple of things. Number one, and this is where I kind of came in, that if they were going to sell wine, they better know more about food because wine is food after all, and food is wine. And the other thing was that, and Ken talked about that, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it, but the importance of what I call ethical agriculture, this whole idea of growing things with an eye toward taking care of Mother Earth and all of that stuff. And it sounds very, at the time, so this is the mid-'80s, at the time it was so airy-fairy, you know? I would travel around the country, and Ken would, and all of us would travel around the country talking about these things, and people would look at us and sort of say, you're from California, a bunch of tree hugger hippie, you know, what? I mean, it was not part of the national conversation at all. But as a result of having this beautiful showplace to kind of show them what was kind of going on. We had media from all over the world, chefs who came from all over the world to learn to integrate this, you know, to take on this kind of ethical agriculture, ethical food kind of deal, and it was really quite extraordinary. So I just want to say to those of you who are much younger than I am, this is where it all started in many ways, and it continues. And so I'm so happy that you've continued the tradition and that you're doing it so well. So my talk today, and all of the speakers, I've talked to many of the speakers, I said, geez, I don't know. I don't have anything to talk about. You know, I've sort of done it all. It's kind of, instead of the do lectures, for me, it's kind of the done lectures, you know, that stuff. But as I thought about it, I thought, well, the thing that I want to do, and Bridget talked about it so eloquently, and also came up this morning, which is kind of a wonderful segue into the little bit that I want to share with you, about the importance of mentoring. About the obligation and actually opportunity that we all have to mentor people. And when I thought about, well, what is it that I'm doing? What do I do now? That's what I do. I mentor. And so I teach a lot in a number of different places at the CIA, not the Central Intelligence Agency, but the Culinary Institute of America. I'm involved, as was mentioned, with Seafood Watch. I was one of the founders of that with Monterey Bay Aquarium, and Chefs Collaborative, and blah, 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 all of that kind of stuff. And so it's really a two-part deal. It's about food and it's about sustainability. And that's been a mantra of mine, which actually I got, and I bet many of you have the same experience. I got it from my grandma. I grew up on a cattle ranch in Colorado. I never knew what a dump was, you know, that you took things to, or the garbage trucks would come by and take your garbage away, because everything was recycled. It was the most amazing thing. And part of that journey as I went along is to remember those mentors. And so I'm going to just share a few little stories about those mentors, not all of them, but some of them who were so important to me that helped me really get down to you know, having a point of view about food and where it comes from, and how important it is to all of us, that I just want to share a bit of that with you. So the first of these is somebody that you'll recognize. It's Julia, and she was a person that I got to know, and I knew her from the early 70s when she was on PBS doing her first television show, which was quite wonderful, called The French Chef, which changed in America. I mean, it's hard to believe now, but it made French cooking, and French cooking became the thing to do in America. And all of us learned how to do it. The CIA still uses French technique as their way of teaching people to cook, so it was quite amazing. But one little thing which I will tell you about that happened here at this ranch, which was quite wonderful. One of these it was actually the biggest one we ever did, which was a culinary campout. And we literally had, not those beautiful teepees and all that stuff that you had, but we had most every great or known chef and food writer in the nation, about 300 of them here, who, if you can believe it, camped out in little pup tents. And these were cheap pup tents, so it wasn't luxurious at all. It was kind of fun to gather, and this was under the auspices of the Chefs Collaborative. If you're not familiar with Chefs Collaborative, it's been around for about 25 years, and it is a group of chefs, restaurateurs, who believe that we have the ability to really influence all kinds of things by gently reminding our guests of where things come from, affecting food policy, doing those kinds of things, but doing it because often people look to chefs and restaurants to decide where the next trends are coming from and all of that. Well, Julia was here, and we were out in the pavilion. The place was jammed. I thought it was going to fall into the water. There were way too many people standing on the floor there. And Julia, I never forget. So for those of you who don't have this picture of Julia, number one, she was a very tall woman. She was about 6'2". Her sister, Nora, was equally tall. We used to call them the Twin Towers. Here they come. But I'll never forget, I was there with Julia, and she was doing some demonstration or something like that. And she stopped in the middle of this demonstration and wagged her finger at the audience and said, and I don't know where this came from. It wasn't apropos to the demonstration at all, but said in that wonderful voice of hers, "You must chew with your mouth open, despite what your mothers and grandmothers told you." I thought, whoa, okay. And I think the key to it was we were talking about this idea of the enjoyment of wine, and there are these kind of 3 S's that we do with wine. We swirl it, and we sniff it, and then we sip it, and all of that stuff. Well, what that's all about is using this, because this is the most important organ of taste. And so she was making the point that you need to do the same thing with food. And many of us who I grew up in a Catholic household. Anyway, I won't go there. How many Catholics are here today? Oh, good. Or recovering Catholics? Yeah, that thing. But it was that thing, no elbows on the table, keep your mouth closed, all of that kind of stuff. And of course, what happens, like wine, if you consume wine that way, wouldn't be very good, wouldn't be very interesting. It's the whole act of swirling and sniffing and slurping and all of that kind of stuff that makes it good. And that was the point that she was kind of making there. She had the most wonderful vocabulary, which I learned so much from her about. We've learned since, that she was a spy during the Second World War, all kinds of amazing things. But on this particular day, she used a word that I've never forgotten. I'm going to share it with you. And your assignment, all of you, is when you leave here, not here because you've all heard it, but when you go home, use this word in conversation someplace, okay? It was kind of like when I was growing up, we had the word a day thing. We would always learn a new word. And this word, she said as part of this conversation about chewing with your mouth open and doing it vigorously and all of this stuff, she said, "You must thoroughly masticate your food." So that's your word, to do that. Be careful about, because there are other words that are close to that you want to be careful of not to get into. But she was really quite a wonderful person. I'm going to read to you. I know I'm not supposed to be reading things, but I have a couple of things I'm going to read to you that I just loved about her, that over the years I wrote down just because I thought it was this idea of being a mentor. Whether she knew it or not, she was mentoring me. Some of them were funny, but some of them were very serious. But these were these kinds of takeaways that I really loved. This was kind of a cute one. She said, well, I was 32 when I started cooking. Up till then, I just ate. And so later in life, so the message there was a very clear one. You can start doing something. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can start doing things, which is really great. People who love to eat are the best people. So if any of you have friends who don't like to eat, get rid of them. You know, if you don't need them in your life. That's a good thing to do. This one I really love. She said, the only real stumbling block is fear of failure. In cooking, you've got to have a what the hell attitude and just kind of go for it. And so I think that was an encouragement that I won't pick on her, Martha Stewart, but I will say something about her. One of the things, I mean, she's a brilliant woman, a great business person and all that stuff, but she has this awful, disgusting phrase that she uses, which just drives me crazy, and it is, now it's just perfect. Nothing is perfect. You know, don't even try to go there. Do you like it? Eat it. You know, if your chocolate cake is tipping over and all that kind of stuff, it's perfectly fine. And Julia was a great proponent of that too, so that was really great. Just a couple of others that I'm going to read. The measure of achievement is not winning awards. And I think we all know that's true. It's doing something that you appreciate, something that you believe in, and that's worthwhile. And finally, the last one I'll share with you, and this is when she was 86, so it was just a few years before she died. She said, and it kind of goes back to this idea again of it's never too late to start anything. She said, and I'll never forget this, it's time that I started thinking about my future, you know, at age 86. That was really pretty extraordinary. So is this interesting to you? I'm being more of a storyteller than sort of anything else. So I want to share, this was the second on the cooking side, and I will ask you, because I think it's kind of a tragedy the more people don't know her, how many of you know MFK Fisher? Raise your hands. Oh, well, more than usually do. I often will ask my classes, how many of you have ever heard of MFK Fisher? And they say to me, never heard of her. She is the best writer about food in the English language. Not recipes, but about how food integrates into life. And she was the most beautiful woman. I first met her when she was 70, about this age. She was tough. She was demanding. She said to me, because I had read everything she had ever written, I remember the first time I met her, I went to her house. And she said to me, because I was there with my mouth open, being gaga and all of that kind of stuff, and she stopped in the middle of a conversation and said to me, if you can't carry on a conversation, you have to go. And it was like, okay, I'll come prepared. But for a number of years up until she passed away, it was my Tuesdays at Maury's kinds of things. I would go every couple of weeks or so to be with her. But I want to share with you something that she said, which I really love. She said, sharing food with another human being is an intimate act and should not be indulged in lightly. And so that connection between food and life, one of the things that I would say, one of the tragedies for me is I'll be driving down to San Francisco on the freeway and I'll look over and somebody's in their car eating something and you think, you don't do that to food. You need to be mindful about it. It needs to be something, because it is one of those great gifts from God, whoever he or she is, that we have. And you need to honor it and love it and appreciate the fact that it's there. So to go on here, so I want to talk just a minute about, I gave you a bit of some information about this. So this was on the sustainability side, and this is this wonderful man, Wendell Berry, who I've gotten to know, who is the most wonderful writer about agrarian America, about farming and all of that kind of stuff. Has written the best things. He's also a wonderful poet and novelist and all kinds of things. He's a farmer still in Kentucky, but a really quite wonderful guy. And if I can read to you, so this is from something that he wrote 45 years ago now that I can remember, and it changed my life forever. It helped coalesce in my mind what it meant to be sustainable, caring about the earth and kind of what happens. And so if you don't mind, I'll just read this paragraph to you very quickly. He said, the consumer must be kept from discovering that in the food industry, as in other industries, the overriding concerns are not quality and health, but volume and price. For decades now, the entire industrial food economy, from the large farms and feedlots to the chains of fast food restaurants, have been obsessed with volume. It has relentlessly increased scale in order to increase volume, in order, presumably, to reduce costs. But as scale increases, diversity declines. As diversity declines, so does health. As health declines, the dependence on drugs and chemicals necessarily increases. As capital replaces labor, it does so by substituting machines, drugs, and chemicals for human workers and for the natural health and fertility of the soil. Pretty powerful stuff. And so if you haven't had a chance to spend time with Wendell Berry, you should, because he's an icon mentor to me and has given me, after all of these years, the energy to kind of go on. The last thing that I want to share with you, and you can read it along with me because I'm going to do it up here, is a poem that I discovered 25, 30 years ago or something that kind of distilled my life in food. I mean, to me, it was the most poignant, lovely. I wish I would have written it. I'm not a good poet. Unfortunately, we have good poets here, so I have to steal it from somebody else, but I want to share this with you. And it's from an amazing writer. She's a psychotherapist, I don't know, she does all kinds of things, yoga teacher, all of that stuff. And the piece is called The Kitchen. And The Kitchen is, I'll read it, you can read along with me. Familiar and strange, the kitchen is a holy place, alive with possibility. A place for the elements, water in the tap, fire in the stove, air between, around, above, and below. Below the cupboard doors are the pots and pans, the bowls and dishes, the measuring cups and the measuring spoons, holy things that lie ready for use, much like our dreams that lie waiting just behind our eyelids. The kitchen is alchemical, a place where we cook actually and spiritually. We come to it for nourishment and ease. We come to it as a center, the heart of the home, the heart of the dwelling. In the kitchen, we are one, linked by hunger, actual hunger, and most importantly, spiritual hunger. We go to the kitchen to be nourished and revealed. It is a holy place. And so, for whatever that's worth, it's the thing that drives me in my continued thing to do a good job in the food world and in the sustainability world and all that stuff. So thank you for inviting me. This has been a quite amazing experience so far, and I look to hear all the rest of you too. So thanks.